Welcome to What Does It Mean to Be a Part of the Body of Christ? When we think of being part of the body of Christ, we think of the church, and Paul talks about this, doesn't he? When he talks about the head of the church and the hands and the feet. And when you think about it, all those different pieces of the body have one particular thing to do, and it can't be done by any other part of the body. So the feet can't do what the hands can do. The hands can't do what the arms can do. The arms can't do what the eyes can do. The eyes can't do what the feet can do. And in a way, this is the same within God's natural creation that isn't about you and me. So let's have a little bit of a look around the garden and see what I mean by that natural interconnectivity between pieces and parts within that creation. If we take a look for a moment at this Japanese anemone, which is dead now. This is March when I'm recording this, and look at all these lovely tufty little bits on here. It's all the fluff of the seed heads. You see. And look at those little teeny tiny black bits, those are the seeds. But they're also part of this fluffy bit. And then you have the stalks and you have the leaves, and they look dead. But throughout the winter, this is where some of our smaller animals may well have been hibernating. What about this tree? This is a flowering cherry. So there you can see its trunk, and it divides into branches, and the further up you go into the twigs, and you can see just here on the very end, and you see that little red, those little red bubbly bits, that's the beginning of the spring flowers. So this tree is made up of those tiny little spring flowers, this twig, all of those twigs, those branches, and all the way down the trunk. And what about this lawn? All these pieces of grass, lots and lots of blades that make up this lawn. And here you can see, perhaps here, some other little bits here, and other little bits here, and this here, which will be a buttercup when it starts to flower. So are there all these pieces and blades of grass that make up this lawn? If it were just one blade of grass, wouldn't be much of a lawn, would it? So you see, there's lots of things about the outdoors, lots of teeny tiny pieces that make up the whole. And that's before we've even talked about what's under the ground. We haven't seen the roots of anything, or the tiny fungus that goes for miles and miles. And you see this tree in the background here. It will have fungus attached to its roots that will stretch for several miles and may well reach this tree we were looking at earlier on, and may well reach this tree over there, the background. You can just about see against the side of that house. But where's our place in all of this? We're really rather good at forcing ourselves into nature and forcing a space that we can fit into within nature, rather than being like this tree that owns its own space. We just brutalise it often and create our own spaces and our own places within God's creation. Take a moment to look up these Bible verses. What does God say about his creation? What did God say about creation? When I think of these different Bible passages, what strikes me is he talks about the glory of the sea, and he talks about the incredible animals that he's filled the sea with, the great Leviathan, for example. And he talks about the wild mountains and the goats that live there, the mass expanses of plain where the horses gallop and their manes run free. It doesn't mention us anywhere in any of that. But we tend to take all the glory. We glorify ourselves and think we are above all of it. We think we have ownership. And yes, okay, so in Genesis, God did tell us that we had stewardship. But stewardship and lording it over things and treating things badly, eating things, factory farming, general cruelty, that doesn't come into stewardship. So have a think about what creation means to you. If you're lucky enough to live by the sea, why not go out for a walk by the sea? Try it in the spring when it's a bit quiet, in the autumn when the storms arrive. If there are hills near you, perhaps stand on the top of it and watch the sunrise or the sunset. If you have local parks near you, take a walk in those parks. What do you see? What natural aspects of them are there for you to look at and to enjoy and to soak in? Try different weathers wherever you are, because the weather is God's creation too, and he talks about that in Job, when he talks about the vast collections of snow that he has and the decisions he makes as to whether to let the hail fall or the rain come. So really we ought to take joy in the different kinds of weather systems that we are given. I know sometimes that's harder than we would hope, when it just goes completely bonkers and causes lots of trouble and destruction. But on the whole, the weather is something to behold and something to enjoy and to take pleasure in. Just put a coat on, you'll be alright. So when you're around outside, held within God's creation, what does it feel like to you? Can you feel his power? Can you feel his creativity, perhaps? Can you feel your place within it? Why not try what is known as a prayer walk? So you could be in your garden, or you can just look at a window box if you live in an apartment block. Or maybe you could go to your local park or a friend's house, or maybe your church has a garden. Even a derelict car park will do it. If you've ever looked closely at a derelict car park, you'll see that there is an abundance of weeds and flowers to look at, and bugs and beetles and all sorts of exciting things. So a prayer walk is when you take a walk within nature. It might be a few minutes, an hour, whatever, and just take a look at what you see. You might just want to sit for a moment and just look at one particular patch. Maybe if you're artistically inclined, draw it. Have a look at Albrecht Dürer's great piece of turf. You can find this all over Google Images, it's easy to find. And he took just a big sod of earth and drew it. It was very contentious at the time. Who'd want to draw a piece of turf? But look at the detail in it. And maybe you might want to do something similar in your own garden or open space. So I'm just going to look for a moment, just in the flower bed here at my home. This is blackstrap, and it always amazes me, this beautiful dark purple colour, but right at the bottom, this fantastic little bit of green. I'm looking at the old flower head and the seeds picked off by the birds through winter. Daffodils, always a harbinger of spring. My favourite flower, and they always speak to me of the hope of warm weather to come. And I love these flowers on this plant because they start off with one colour and by the end of the day they've turned another. And they're so beautiful and pretty and small. The colours in this brickwork and the lichen that started to grow on it in the past couple of years. Ice plant. One of the things that I love about this is how it catches the rain in little beads within its leaves. It's like jewels to me. to this plant here and other dead leaves within the middle of it. And this pear tree, which just looks like a dead stick, but there are the buds of spring. The new leaves getting ready to come out. My favourite daffodils. Another couple of weeks and these are going to be bursting in yellow. And a scruffy old dead looking plant. But amongst all the old dead growth are these tiny little pieces of green leaves. And this moss, well, not a friend of the gardener, but the beautiful tiny pieces of bright green on it. A tangle of dead wood, but the tiny pieces of green and the fresh idea of spring. And again on here, little drops of rain held in the tightly curled leaves. Reminds me of my own preciousness in God's sight. So when you look at those tiny things, all those little things that make up the whole, the leaves that I was looking at, the dead bits of old autumnal leaves that are trapped underneath the new growth, the emerald green of the moss, and I wonder what that might say to me. In March at the moment, it's Lent 2021, and I see the new growth and think of Christ and his resurrection that will soon be upon us in another few weeks' time. But as you look wherever you are, what is God saying to you in those small, connected, collected things in his creation? What is his message to you? What do you take from it? Hold that in your heart and ponder it. Take it as a message from God that you are a part of his creation and that he loves you even as he loves the teeny tiny things that you see in your garden.